My name is Erica Slocum, and I'm a regional adoption coordinator with the state of Georgia. I'm here today to talk to you about transracial adoption and becoming culturally competent. I am, like I said, a regional adoption coordinator from the state of Georgia, and I am with the state adoption unit. I have been with child welfare for 20 years, and I have been in my current position for 11 years. So I will start sharing some historical background on transracial adoption and why I selected this topic for my action research project and how I chose my PICO. I will review some cultural competencies as well as share some background data that I collected to jumpstart this project. I will discuss the methods that I used in the development of my project, followed by training outcomes, the challenges that I faced. Oh yes, there were some challenges, and the lessons learned in the process. Last but not least, looking forward to what's next and impact of MPLD. So in my literature review and historical background information is as follows. In 1948, white parents in Minnesota adopted a Black child. This was the first recorded transracial adoption in the United States. In 1972, the National Association of Black Social Workers, NABSW, opposed transracial adoption, stating that transracially adopted children it prevented transracial adopted children from forming a strong racial identity and prevents them from developing survival skills necessary to deal with a racist society. In 2021, the organization still maintained this position. In a journal in the winter of 2021, the NABSW wrote, "Children who cannot be given a permanent placement with kin or fictive kin should be adoptively placed with a family of the same race or ethnicity." The NAACP also opposed transracial adoption, saying that Black children brought up in white homes are deprived of cultural influences necessary to develop self-esteem and pride in their heritage. Also, that discrimination made it harder to qualify as adoptive parents. Some adoption agencies prefer higher income and two-parent households, criteria that disqualify many Blacks. Ultimately, those who oppose transracial adoption finally acknowledged that if there were no African-American families for African-American children in care, that the families of other races should be considered. MPLD provides that neither the state nor any other entity of the state that receives federal funds from the federal government and is involved in adoption or foster care placements may not deny to any person the opportunity to become an adoptive or foster parent on the basis of race, color, or national origin of the person or the child involved. Delay or deny the placement of a child for adoption into foster care or on the basis of race, color, or national origin of the adoptive, foster parent, or the child involved. It also provides that diligent recruitment for potential foster and adoptive parents that reflect the ethnic and racial diversity of the children in the state for whom the foster and adoptive homes are needed. So I chose to focus on transracial adoption as my topic for my action research project because I believe that it's important that parents become culturally competent when choosing to adopt outside of their race. As a child welfare professional, I believe that we have an obligation to children and families to provide resources and training to help enhance the parent's capacity to meet the needs of the child, which could potentially increase the well-being outcomes. For the past decade, in my current position as a regional adoption coordinator, I have been afforded the opportunity to participate in many trainings and workshops. Oftentimes, an adult transracial adoptee would be the featured guest speaker or panelist. A common thread for these presentations or discussions would be that missing piece for the adoptee's cultural and racial identity. This piqued my curiosity, and I wanted to take a deeper dive into the preparation and to the sustainability of Georgia's transracial adoptive families. However, due to some barriers in state policy and federal law, I was unable to fully pursue the preparation portion of the research project and ultimately had to adjust my research to focus on post-adoption services instead. So my PICO, the population intervention comparison and outcome. So with mine, if the families who contact the Georgia Center for Resources and Support request and receive information and or training on important aspects of transracial parenting, such as racial awareness, multicultural planning, and survival skills, will their knowledge increase in terms of these topics that are related to a successful transracial adoption? So I want to talk a minute about competencies for parenting and transracial adoptions. Cultural Competence for Transracial Adoptive Parents by Elizabeth Bonk. This article provided a clear approach to understanding and presenting the three-part construct to transracial adoptive parents. This approach and model is built upon the idea that transracial adoptive parents should acquire the attitudes, the skills, and the knowledge that empowers them to help their children develop positive racial identities and the survival skills for life. It is the concept for which I developed my intervention training. These constructs include racial awareness, multicultural planning, and survival skills. So the first component is racial awareness, which refers to a person's awareness of how the variables of race, ethnicity, cultural, language, and related power status operates in one's life and in the lives of others. It refers to the understanding of history of institutional racism, systematic discrimination, and oppression towards minority groups. It also requires awareness of privilege that comes with being white and the distinct challenges facing children of color. The second component is multicultural planning, which refers to the creation of avenues for transracially adopted children to learn about and participate in his or her culture of birth. This requires parents to be intentional for the child to connect with others of the same race and culture. Some of the ways that in which parents can support their children's identity formation through choosing integrated schools, churches, parents cultivating relationships with people of the same race as their child. They can integrate music, art, food, and other cultural elements of the child's heritage into the family and living in a multicultural community. Last but not least, survival skills refers to the recognition and the need and the ability of parents to provide their children of color to cope successfully with racism. Some of the ways that this is achieved is first to admit and accept the fact that racism exists and that we live in a race-conscious society, calling out racism, standing for fairness, validating the child's feelings of anger and hurt, and giving your child the tools that they need to cope, defend, and assess the risk of racism and discrimination. These components are important for transracially adopted children's well-being. So my background data included a 5-year data analysis on the number of Black children who were adopted transracially between the years of 2016 and 2021. The data was collected from Georgia's SACWA system. The data indicated that 31% of all children classified as Black have an adopted parent who is classified as white. And for the reverse, 14% of all children classified as white have an adopted parent classified as Black. Blacks make up 31.5% of Georgia's population. Any explanation of the difference in cross-racial adoption must take into account the disparity in the size of the racial population. Also, as part of my background data collection, I surveyed our agencies and the child placement agencies foster and adopt parents around resources and supports. Out of the 89 parents surveyed, 59 had adopted transracially. So the parent survey results was for the 59 who adopted transracially, 68% were white or Caucasian, and 29% were Black or African American. 53% of the children adopted transracially were Black, and 24% were white, and 13% of those children were Hispanic. Summary of all of the parent race included 28.8% of African American and 67.8% of whites, and 2 or more races was 1.7%, and one race was not selected at 1.7%. So in the parent survey, there were questions asked around preparation by workers prior to adopting transracially. And one of the questions was, did your worker offer training on transracial adoption prior to placement? 22% responded yes, while 78% responded no. Another question was, did your worker encourage you to examine your motivation to adopt transracially? 31% responded yes, and 69% responded no. Another interesting finding was that parents were asked if they were offered information about cultural resources and events by the agency. And of those who had adopted transracially, 73% were not offered any cultural resources. The next few slides are questions from my initial survey to the transracial adoptive parents regarding their adoption journey. And I asked how comfortable did they feel talking to their worker about topics related to race, culture, and ethnicity. And 56% reported that they were very comfortable. Parents were asked if they thought that DFACS or the child placement agency had prepared them to parent a child of a different race, cultural, or ethnic background. And 33% of those surveyed responded that they felt somewhat prepared. 24% responded not too much, and 26% responded not at all. The numbers indicated that 50% of the families were not prepared or only slightly prepared to parent a child of a different race, culture, and ethnic background. When asked how often did they speak with their worker about what was needed to effectively parent your adopted child as it relates to their race, culture, and ethnicity, I found this data to be particularly interesting because on the previous question, it was 56% that reported that they felt very comfortable speaking with their case manager. However, on this question, only 10% had spoken to their case manager, and 39% sometimes spoke with their case manager. Families were also asked to what extent did they maintain cultural contact and connections with those that represent their child's culture, race, and ethnicity. And 33% of the parents responded that they had to a great extent. Identity formation is an important part of development, but especially important for children who are adopted transracially, as they are unable to see themselves in their parents as they would if they were in a same race family. 100% of these families that adopt transracially should provide opportunities for themselves and for their children to have authentic relationships and connections with people as the same race as their child. Finally, I wanted to know the level of thought that was invested before making the decision to adopt transracially. I did this by asking if they had thoroughly explored their own cultural backgrounds, influences, and the way that they think and act and speak about issues of race, poverty, and privilege. 26% responded that they had, to a great extent, thought greatly about their decision. I find this to be a pretty low percentage, as adopting transracially changes the composition of their families forever. White families are no longer considered to be in the majority. Regardless, society looks at a white parent as a savior or a rescuer of a Black or brown child, while African Americans' experiences are much different when they adopt a white child. We've all heard in the news and on social media about African American parents who have adopted white children being harassed by others, or having the police called on them because they have a white child. Another difference that a white child has over a Black or brown child is his white privilege, regardless of his family. For these children, their transracial adoptive experiences are very different. I want to talk briefly about the methodology that I used in this process. So first, I developed a training, cultural competence strategies for parenting and transracial adoption. I developed a pre and post training and feedback survey for the parents. I administered the pre-training survey, and I completed a virtual training and administered the post-training survey. So just a few details about my training. It was scheduled for an hour, but it went over to about an hour and 20 minutes. The content was around racial awareness and how racial identity, bias, and discrimination and racism impacts children. The multicultural planning, including the dynamics of racial society, and how to utilize specific strategies to create and promote avenues for children and youth to learn and participate in his or her culture of birth. And then last but not least, how to prepare children and youth with the survival skills needed to cope successfully with racism and discrimination. My audience was adoptive and foster parents. There was some biological parents, and to my surprise, there were several categories that they that may have identified them as being a biological parent. However, they were welcome. And it was a voluntary training. The email invitation went out from the Georgia Resource Center supports, and it was posted on the website. However, my training flyer did indicate that it was for adoptive parents. And the training was remote training. So there were a total of 28 participants in the training, and 23 responded to the survey. However, because they could select more than one category, there was a total of 40 responses that were received regarding their parenting status. So adoptive parents that was selected at 38% of the participants. Foster parents was a similar 38%, and there was 13% of biological parents, and there were also 38% of 5 other participants that wrote in that they were an adoptive case manager, a fostering to adopt person, 1 grandparent, 1 recruiter, and one waiting person. Being a transracial adoptive parent was not a requirement to attend the training. So the demographics of the participants, there was 48% that identified as African American, and there were 48% that identified as white, and there was 4% that identified as Black British. 65% of the participants were female and 35% were male. So my evaluation strategy was a post training survey. The results of the training, participants were asked if they felt that their knowledge increased on the topics, on the following topics. So as to the racial awareness, there were 91% that strongly agreed that their knowledge had increased. In multicultural planning, there were 96% that strongly agreed. And in survival skills, there was also 96% that strongly agreed that their knowledge had increased. 100% of the participants strongly agreed that they plan to use the information that they learned. Finally, if they thought that this discussion model would be helpful for individuals seeking to adopt transracially, 100% strongly agreed that this discussion model would be very helpful. Following the training, participants were asked to list 2 things that they thought was most helpful. Here are some of the qualitative responses. 19 participants provided typed comments, and here are some. Learning about the need for connection to birth family, the videos and the chats, other transracial adopted parents. The videos make things real. In protective factors and white privilege, resources and protective factors, and diversity and examples of microaggressions. And for me, yes, I use several videos, not only because I'm a visual learner, but I wanted people to hear the stories and to be able to connect with those who had lived experience. The final video of my training presentation was a TED Talk video, and it was of a white woman. Her name is Kim Van Brunt, who with her husband had adopted 2 children from Uganda. She spoke about her experience and how she thought that she was prepared to raise 2 Black children, and discovered that she had no idea of the struggles that confronted her Black children. This is one of the most powerful videos that I have viewed, and certainly provided another perspective for the audience. So outcomes, participants had significantly more knowledge after the training than they did before. On the pretest, the average score was 6.75% of the questions correct. And on the post-test, the average score was 7.53 questions correct. Here is an excerpt of questions that were asked to test the participants' knowledge before and after the training. Blank is giving children and youth the tools they need to cope with, defend against, and assess the risks of racism and discrimination. The next question is statements such as, when I look at you, I don't see color. America is a melting pot, and there is only one race, and that's the human race. And those are examples of colorblindness. True or false? We should not talk to our children about racism, racial bias, or discrimination, because these topics are too painful. So I came across this quote, and I thought that it was very fitting for this project. And it reads, What many Black and biracial, transracial adoptees were not prepared for was the societal realities that they faced were the same as those facing other people of color. The information that white transracial adopted parents needed to give their children did not exist in the white world. These parents would have to interact with Black America in order to understand the problems most likely to trouble transracially adopted children. And that's by Rhonda Rorda. Some of the challenges with my ARP and then the lessons learned. My biggest challenge was aligning my ARP with MIPA. I had to change my research project to ensure alignment with federal law. I found that the challenges of understanding MIPA can also make it difficult to prepare and support families for transracial placements, foster, and adopt. The lack of understanding could potentially prevent agencies from having honest conversations with families prior to deciding to foster or adopt youth or of a different race. I think that it's negligent not to share racial and cultural information with prospective adoptive parents. Another challenge was the time that was allotted for my training. My training was set for 1 hour. Afterwards, I realized that it was just enough time to get through the material and not to fully engage the participants. I had the participants to respond and put questions in the chat, thinking that it would allow time at the end to answer the questions and to get some feedback. While I'm very proud of the training that I developed, I do feel like that I may have shortchanged the participants by not allowing time for engagement and dialogue. There was a delay in posting the training on the website, but after sending out the email blast, there was initially 103 people that registered for the training, but only 28 attended. The greatest lesson learned from my intervention is that parents do want resources and tools needed to support their children, but they need it sooner, not later, not at post-adoption. There is a level of preparation that is needed for these families. They should understand that there is great work and intentionality involved in raising and supporting a child of a different race, culture, or ethnicity than their own, so they can truly make an informed decision about whether they wish to adopt transracially. So what's next? First, I would like to share my research findings with the State Office Adoption Team and the Permanency and Placement leadership, as well as to determine if it can be shared beyond our team to upper leadership. My strategy training was recorded by the Georgia Center of Resources and Support, and I would like to make sure that it's posted on the site as an on-demand training. I would like to seek other opportunities to engage adoptive parents in ways to support their youth based on the training model that I used. When I recently checked the GCAR's website, there were only 7 books in the Linden Library on transracial adoption. I would like to see that more resources are added to the site. Last but not least, I would like to start a support group for transracial adopted families. As a child welfare professional, we understand the challenges of raising a child of a different race. I would like to have these children and parents to connect so that they can glean from one another and receive ongoing support and training. Having conversations early and often is needed for better outcomes. What we have found is not until transracial adoptees become adults do we hear about their struggles. I'm not sure if it is if it's because they don't have the platform or they don't have the words. But with a support group, there is an opportunity for these young people to be heard rather than sooner than later. I found that there are some support groups across the country, some that were located on Facebook and other online platforms, but Georgia is currently without a formal group. MPLD impact. MPLD has been an amazing journey. It has challenged me in ways that I could not have imagined. When I received the requirements to complete the program, including this action research project, I was nervous about my ability to get it all done, especially this research project, as it has been a long time since I have been in school. But now I truly understand the value of research. I learned the importance of data and how it supports research. I've had the opportunity to meet and network with like-minded people with the same passion and intensity to transform our child welfare systems. My individual development plan identified some areas of growth that I was encouraged and coached to increase my leadership capacity. The coursework, the action research project, and my individual development plan all challenged me in my transactional mindset that I developed over the years. And now I'm becoming a transformational leader. This program has opened my eyes to a better leadership style as a transformational leader. I have started to practice it in my personal life and in my ministry. I couldn't have made it through without the encouragement and support of my mentor, Deborah Burris, Germany, Arlene, Sharon Lynn, Anika, and Wadia, who all helped pull me through. I greatly appreciate and honor you today. Here is a list of my references. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. Stay connected.